Today's quick video is a response to a video put out by YouTuber Matt Christiansen titled, "Conservative Gays Need to Shut the Fuck Up. Leftist Reaction to Columnist Proves His Point." Christiansen is commenting on a spat between writers Chad Felix Green and Lauren Thiessen. Fair warning, I am not familiar with any of the people involved, so this is purely in the realm of a single video that pushes forward the ugly little lie that conservatives in the US are a persecuted population. It started when Green wrote an article about how, as a gay conservative, he finds himself more likely to face harassment on the basis of his political affiliation rather than his sexuality. Christiansen is quick to agree.
Chad argues his experience as a conservative has been tougher than his experience as a gay man, and we can all go point for point debating which is worse, but that debate is beside the broader point, which is the ideal Chad is describing here. That ideal, the goal, is that everyone can speak freely. Gay, straight, conservative, liberal, whatever.
In his article, Green, much like Christiansen in his video, provides no real evidence of this. Christiansen's video airs a few random news clips of people who have been harassed for wearing MAGA hats, making the clumsy mistake of confusing a few anecdotes as evidence for a national bias. And Green's article is even worse as it centers around his own personal feeling of not being able to express himself. Considering he has a sizable platform, writing for the Federalist, I'm not sure why he doesn't feel like he can express himself, but he is. If I may inject some real evidence into this conversation though, according to FBI crime stats for 2016, the latest available, there were 1,255 victims of hate crimes based on sexual orientation in the US, with slightly under 75% of those targeting gay or lesbian people specifically. Now there is a counter to my argument, and that's simply providing the statistics of conservatives who are harassed or the victims of crime because of their political opinions. We actually don't have those. The FBI doesn't count such ridiculous stats. But I did find a list from 2016 that the Daily Caller put together of all the incidents of Trump supporters being harassed. There are 8 incidents. And that number 8 is actually overstated because this list includes a murder that had nothing to do with Trump. Someone just kinda mentioned him during an argument, and they were murdered soon after. The reason it's on the Daily Caller's list is because they're a garbage source that distorts the truth. Lists of attacks like these are the anecdotes that are used to present this conservative victimhood narrative you see every night on Fox News. They'll take one incident and just repeat it endlessly to make it look like conservatives really are under attack. Of course, they're not really connected to any data. And if we're going to go anecdote for anecdote, here's one for you.
We do want to update you on the breaking news out of Orlando, the terror attack on a gay nightclub. Right now, at least 20 are dead, maybe more. The shooter also dead. Police say that he was well prepared, he was organized. They do not believe that he was from the area. More than 40 have been taken to a local hospital.
Oh, but please, show me another news story about someone in a MAGA hat being bumped by a shopping cart. You know, we haven't even gotten to the Thiessen article. Christiansen's whole video is predicated on the idea that he's caught her in some kind of trap. First, let's see him misread the title.
You're not stigmatizing Chad. You're not telling him to shut the fuck up and that his voice doesn't matter on account of him being gay. You're doing that on account of him being conservative.
She's saying he should shut up because he's conservative and gay. Not either, but both. It's a cheeky title and one I probably wouldn't have gone with. But she actually has a point in here, if you dig a little deeper. Instead, he goes on to talk about how you can't reduce discrimination to political power and legislation, highlighting that since gay marriage is legal, that same standard would nullify Thiessen's argument.
If having friends in powerful places invalidates Chad's argument, there's at least as credible a case to be made with the same reasoning against Lauren's response.
He spends a long time on this. I don't know why, because this isn't what her article is about. You can see a hint that this is just a side point in this section right here that Christiansen didn't highlight. The words "putting aside" means that this is a tangent she isn't fully exploring. Getting distracted by this, Christiansen wastes several minutes of his video arguing against something that the Thiessen article never really attempts to argue. At least not in earnest.
Gay conservatives use their sexuality as a means to defend their abhorrent views. Their sexuality then becomes a tool to help uphold the anti-feminist, white supremacist, wealth-favoring status quo, and they need to fucking stop, she writes. Well, first off, Chad didn't do this. He never claimed to be right or correct on the basis of his sexual orientation. He simply said that his sexual orientation is not the primary source of the vitriol thrown at him.
Green's article is literally about his own experiences and feelings of being discriminated against. How can this be about anything other than him trying to use the fact that he's gay to give his argument merit? His article makes vague comments about the left and how he feels he can't speak out anymore. It's a very serious problem in his mind, but he provides no evidence of it existing in the world.
She writes, "I've been discriminated against, these gay male narratives tell you. So believe me when I say that women, immigrants, trannies, and poor people aren't the real victims here." Implicit here is that these other minority groups do get that identity shield, that they are, by definition, victims, but conservative gay men are not.
That's not what that sentence means. The sentence is an obvious rhetorical tool, using some hyperbole to present what is essentially her argument, that a gay conservative claiming that gay part of their identity is less of a liability than their conservative beliefs makes them a useful idiot for a political party that would dismiss the concerns of other marginalized groups. Simple, right? The issue isn't that she's saying these groups should be listened to on the basis of their identity. What she's saying is that we shouldn't be dismissing their claims because someone who is also from a marginalized identity says it's okay. He's using his identity as a gay man to push forward a conservative victim narrative. There's more bad reading in this, but here's perhaps the dumbest take in the whole video.
And this author, she might say, well, yeah, I do favor discrimination against people for terrible ideas that they choose. I don't favor discrimination against people over their innate characteristics. And sure, go with that if you want to. But the problem is, you've just made the case that in addition to political perspective, we ought to stigmatize all sorts of behavior. We ought to stigmatize all sorts of religious beliefs. We ought to stigmatize any opinions the individual chooses that can be linked to bad outcomes. And at that point, you're making a fundamentally anti-freedom argument.
Yes, let's stigmatize political positions. Let's stigmatize behaviors. And hell, let's stigmatize some opinions. I know, this makes me anti-freedom. But I bet I can come up with a few stigmas we can almost all get behind. Cannibalism, theocracy, and wearing jorts are all things I happily stigmatize. The third paragraph of her article reads, "What I'm saying is, conservative politics should have more of a stigma than being queer." This is one of the crucial points in her article, by the way. She's saying that even pretending that Green is right about anti-gay discrimination not being a problem, or at least not as big a problem as anti-conservative discrimination, it's a sign of progress when one group of people is now free to live openly as they want. Being gay and being conservative are not the same thing. The rest of her article details how this is a double-edged sword, though, highlighting a few prominent gay conservatives, such as Andrew Sullivan and Chadwick Moore, who have gone from oppressed to oppressor, willing to take the part of the same political affiliation that fought so bitterly against their rights for decades. But she doesn't even really begrudge them. The full text of the paragraph Christiansen quotes reads, "Honestly, I don't blame most of the men I've mentioned for acting in their own personal self-interest. You do what you gotta do to make a living, I suppose. And a few more gays voting Republican won't bring about the apocalypse any faster. Where these guys get really dangerous, however, is when we give them the microphone and the authority to tell us who we should and shouldn't care about. I've been discriminated against, these gay male narratives tell you. So believe me when I say that, insert victim group here, aren't the real victims here. If too many people believe those words, all of the fantastic revolutionary ideals of freedom and empathy that form the foundation of queer liberation will quickly fade away. And almost all of us will be worse off for it. I know it's naive to think these dudes are ever going to shut the fuck up, but the least the rest of us could do is stop listening to them." The cheeky headline was an invitation to read an article that, in its acerbic way, celebrates that we now criticize people for their ideas instead of their sexuality. And this is the sort of progress we want. And then it highlights how, when an identity becomes part of the mainstream, it can be co-opted to target other groups for discrimination. It's a good point. Christiansen is more dangerous, trying to tie sexual orientation to political affiliation. He tries to put them on even standing in that we should accept them both, but that's an absurd position to take. So long as it's between consenting adults, what people do in their bedrooms should never disqualify them from public discourse. But a grotesque political affiliation? Yeah, you better believe that deserves some stigma. And I'm not speaking about all forms of conservatism, of course. There are certain noxious types that aren't that difficult to think of when we think of grotesque political affiliations. Green's article was published on The Federalist. and upon its publication, this is how it was received on Twitter. There are a few comments like this one, but generally speaking, it's not the worst ratio I've seen. But Thiesen's article? Not quite as warmly received, was it? After Thiesen's article was published, within the first 24 hours, Green retweeted people criticizing it 25 times. There's also articles like this one, highlighting some of the mean comments Green got on social media. And somehow that article got up about 12 hours after the original was published. They work quick. The point of that article was to make the outrageous claim that conservatives are under attack, using the author's gay identity to say that being conservative is tougher than being gay. And then when people call them out as being full of shit, they use that outrage as proof of the discrimination that never existed in the first place. They're confusing criticism of their ridiculous claim as persecution. And dopes like Christiansen go right along with it, because that's just the world they want to believe in. While you're still here, why not like this video or comment on it, or you can also follow me on Twitter, ask me a question on Curious Cat. If you really liked it, why not subscribe?